class, what I wanted to discuss is we've been using a lot of jQuery and JavaScript to logically display content. Um, some of this logic of showing, displaying, and doing things, some of it could be achieved with plain old CSS, and whenever possible, if you can achieve it with CSS, it's preferably to use CSS than to use JavaScript. JavaScript is considered to be a very expensive way of manipulating content. If the browser already supports certain features of hiding and showing and displaying, ideally we would use the CSS alternative, right? So I like to show some of these logical things that can be done. In particular, we're going to be using bootstrap mechanisms to achieve certain things, like creating some drop downs or being able to hide and show different content depending on the size of the screen. Everything could be achieved with jQuery and JavaScript, but if you always have the choice that if you can achieve it with CSS, it's better just to do it with CSS. Right now, there's a small discussion on Purix, calculating certain things on the EPUB, and the discussion is well, yes, I could achieve the same thing with JavaScript, but it's certainly it's a much better solution if we could achieve it through CSS. And so we're having this current discussion, so I wanted to. It's pertinent. Also, for the last couple of weeks, some folks have been asking me a couple of questions, and I think there's a little confusion on what things were being rendered where, whether it was server side, client side, and so I just wanted to back up a little bit and maybe take a look at a couple more topics that we've covered before, just review them. So for this, I'm just going to build a brand new app from scratch, and let's start using some widgets, Bootstrap widgets that are already built, that already have certain behaviors based on CSS.
So you didn't put this on the sandbox, right? It's sitting on the public. It's okay.
Yes, right. Yeah. As if it were a brand new application. Right? So we're going to build something that's inspired by something like this, Google Docs, where you might have a list of items down below, right? Where you have a left-hand side with a name of some document, then a couple of columns, and maybe a couple of tools on the right-hand side. And even though, notice that how it's responsive, right? As it becomes smaller, this becomes smaller as well. It has certain thresholds, right? It has a couple of thresholds that when you go beyond those thresholds, it then changes the width. See that? So that's very common in responsive design. I'm not sure why they didn't keep going and provide a mobile version of this when it becomes smaller. Typically, what you would do is you would start hiding some of these columns, right? For instance, you would hide maybe the owner or the last modified, and you would only keep perhaps the just the name column, right, on mobile phones. Right? I don't know why they didn't go that far, but let's implement something similar based on this idea, right? So let's also let's marry this with another idea of this one, Weebly. Weebly is an application that allows you to create websites, right? So you have a list of many websites that you would manage, right? So let's instead of these being Google Docs, let's imagine these were websites I'm building, right? And each website would have all sorts of other things like pages, right? And each page could have all sorts of widgets, right? Let's build something like that. So let's build a page. I'm sorry. Sure. Yeah. Let's build. Let's start with the dashboard, right, and then we'll go to those widgets. So let's create a page called website list.html, and right now it's empty. And let's bring some of the some of the styling that we might want here is, Bootstrap would live here. We might want something like perhaps a top header. Notice that the header, sees how it's stuck at the top. Right? That's a very common behavior, right? That's especially mobile phones that allow you to maintain navigational regardless of where you scroll, right? And Bootstrap has tons of these things that are already built, right? That we used to do this with JavaScript, positioning things wherever we wanted programmatically. But if you have the option, you would prefer to do it using CSS. All right, so let's create a couple a header and a lists item, and Bootstrap already has a lot of those things, right? If we go to components, Bootstrap components, for instance, we could borrow a couple things from here. For instance, the list group. Notice it has a styling that groups things in ULs and LIs, right? Unordered lists and line items. So let me copy that. Let me grab that and add that as content of the main page here. Right, if we navigate here, we restart the server. The server, notice that it has been configured to host, what's it saying? Oh, it's looking for MongoDB. Let me start MongoDB.
I had the same problem. I just commented that piece.
Yeah, or you can, right, you can comment it out. Oops. There we go. Right. Let's try that again. Okay. This has been configured to host all the static content under this directory, right? Under the public directory right here, right? This tells to map anything that follows the root context of the URL, map it to all physical files under the public directory, which we covered that a couple weeks ago. So let's go to localhost. So that's root, that slash maps to this public directory right here, okay? So if I want to navigate to this website -list, I would say /app and then website lists. So website list.html. So notice that this renders like a native UL and line items because there's no styling, no Bootstrap libraries that have been applied to this. We could use the local CSS that we have here. There it is, Bootstrap. So we can load that library here from the head, link href, right, and then point to the CSS. Actually, we're inside the app directory, so we need to go up one and then down, right? So we're going to go up one, then down to CSS, and under there we have Bootstrap. There it is. And we need to tell the browser how to interpret this document, interpret it as a style sheet. If we do that, now this UL is interpreted using all the styling from that style sheet, right? Everybody okay? All right. Notice that this is flush with the left-hand side and the right-hand side. Typically, we want to add some margins on either side, and Bootstrap has classes for that as well. We can wrap this content with a div with a class that provides a container, right? A container. This container is, again, it's a Bootstrap class that adds margins on left and right. Right? If we reload, there it is. Notice that it adds these 15 pixels on either side. Now, if I make it smaller, notice what's happening here, right? Let me put it to 100%. Notice that it's the margins are responsive. What they do is that they're centering the content, right? And then the either sides. Notice that the width of the content stays the same, and the remainder is just split across both sides, right? If I make it even smaller, notice what's going to happen If I go beyond the threshold, notice what's happening. See that? Right? It's gone beyond a threshold. If I make it even smaller, right? Again, I reach another threshold. Finally, I reach the smallest, and then it just expands to take up the entire width of the page, right? That's a very common behavior in responsive design, where you target 4 particular types of sizes of screens, and you provide some logic names for them, right? So this is extra small screens, right? It's a generic name for portrait phones or portrait small tablets. These are medium size or small screens, or these are medium size screen, and then these are large size screens. Okay, now these are the semantics of how we would call each one of these. Right? Bootstrap, all these libraries refer to this mechanism of treating these pages like this by what they call a grid system. Right? Foundations does this, Bootstrap does this, AngularJS material does this. It breaks up the page into these grids, right? This is reminiscent from when the web just came out. That we used to use tables to lay out pages. Right? We break up the page using tables because HTML doesn't allow you to lay out things from left to right. Right? And tables are great because you break up the page into columns and you put things side by side. But tables should not be used for that. So instead, we use CSS today to achieve the same. All right. That's one of the container classes. Another container class is container fluid. Container fluid does more or less the same thing, but instead of targeting different pages, different size pages, it treats them all the same. It just gives the 15 pixels to side to side. Right? It just takes up the entire width of the page, right, and just has these minor 15 pixel from left and right. Okay, I prefer this container. It depends what you're targeting. All right, let's keep going here. Let's put here and name this to be websites. Okay, so these are websites. Notice that the website is outside of the container. Right? Notice that it doesn't have that 15 pixel, so it should be defined actually inside of the container, right? To have those additional margins left, right. There it is, right? So it's nicely flush, and everything is aligned nicely. All right, so let's add a couple more things here. I would like to add this header at the top that is stuck at the top, regardless of us scrolling up and down, right? And to do that, again, Bootstrap, and depending which way you use, Angular material has it, Bootstrap has it. They all have this out of the box, and you should first try to accomplish it using the library before you build your own. All right? Don't try to do this from scratch. See if someone already built the classes and the styling for it already, so you could reuse these libraries, or some other team member might have already solved this. So to accomplish this, if you go to Bootstrap and go to the navigations, again we're still in the components. If you go to nav bars, we'll see that there's quite a few of these navigation bars already pre-built, right? Which we could just copy and paste into our own pages. So first, reuse instead of reinventing something. See if this is already been solved. All right, so let's copy some of this stuff here, and I'm going to copy it outside of the container, right? Navbar header. This brand right here, right, is this brand over here. It's kind of provides an anchor for the rest of the application, such as like Google over here. This would be like the branding, right, or some either the particular product that you're using or the particular company-wide logo. So this brand over here. I'm just going to copy that, paste it over here, and then just close this, close it down here with this div and this nav. Okay. Okay. If we refresh that, notice that we have this brand stuck way at the top, right? But it's not quite what we're looking for, right? If I make this really, really tiny and I start scrolling, notice that the header is not stuck at the top, right? So we don't have that yet, that behavior. To illustrate this, I'm going to add more of these list items. I'm going to copy this, right, and paste them several times so that we have lots and lots of content. So notice that that header at the top is not stuck, right, like we were expecting. So to do that, if you scroll down just a little further, there's fixed top, fixed bottom. If you want to fix the header at the top or you want to fix the header at the bottom, the only thing you need to do is just add an additional class, navbar fixed top. Right? So we copy that, and we bring it over and paste it here. Right? We are adding behaviors as we go. Almost as notice the naming convention that they have. They have like a generic navbar class that provides some of the core behaviors of navbars, and then you add additional classes to add incremental behaviors, right? That almost try to follow like the inheritance model from in object orientation, right? Where you have a top-level class, right, and then you inherit from there, adding additional incremental behaviors as you add more specific classes. So these libraries are built following those ideas, right? All right. So if we refresh, notice that now the header is stuck at the top, right? And notice what happened to the content. See the content, right? It's kind of like underneath. And the header is kind of showing under the header. So the reason if we explore this, you'll notice that the nav bar, right, the following attribute has been added. Position fixed, right? If I remove that nav bar fixed, if I remove that, right, you'll notice that the position is relative. Right? Position is relative, right? So position has several values. These are all attribute styling attributes that control the behavior on how things are positioned on the page. Okay. By default, the browser uses two policies. One is the block policy, and the other is the inline policy. Block policy, meaning every element on the screen is rendered either using the block policy or the inline policy, right? And the inline policy is that things render from left to right and from top to bottom, right? We are in Western society, Western culture, and things are read from left to right and from top to bottom. If we were in another culture, perhaps the rendering of the browser would be completely different. But here in Western society, in Western culture, from left to right, top to bottom. So things flow, right, rendered from left to right. And when there's no more content, when there's no more space, it just wraps, right, and continues from left to right. And if it resizes, right, things just squish, right, and there's no more space, and it just re-wrap as you move the size of the page. Yes? So that's the inline policy. The block policy is that it takes up the entire width of the page as much as you give it, or the parent container, right? And everything else is pushed away and pushed down vertically, right? And now using styles, you can override that behavior. It says, no, I don't want you to use that policy of rendering. I can override it. Okay. One way to override it is to, for instance, specify that I want a different position mechanism, right? Relative, the relative means that, hey, render wherever you were supposed to render according to the browser, right? So let the browser decide where to put you. And then relative to that position that the browser wants to put you, I'm now going to relatively move you left or right a little bit, right, to the left or to the right and whatnot. Yes? So each element following the HTML language has specific behaviors. So for instance, headers, H1, H2, H3, H4, those are all block elements. Okay. So notice that the any content that I put next to the website will be pushed down, right? So notice that if I ask the browser, hey browser, what's the rectangle that you are giving to this H1? See that H1? The browser says this is the rectangle I am giving to that H1, the entire width of the page. See that? That's taking up the entire width of the page. As opposed to a particular word or a UL is also a block item, right? It takes up the entire width of the page. Line items are also block elements. Let's give you another one. For instance, let's give you this content over here. Let's put it a bold B because I want to render it bold. Yes. If I re-render it, notice that this cross judo. If I inspect it, this B, right? It's not taking up the entire width of the page. It's only taking that small area. So what this tells me is that B is behaving inline. That means that if I put something next to it, it's not going to push it down. It's going to put it right next to it, right? If I re-render, notice that indeed it's using inline, right? Everything gets rendered following from left to right, and when there's not enough space, it'll wrap. Oh, I can't make it smaller. I can't make it smaller to wrap. If I copy this many times, it doesn't fit. Notice that it wraps. Right? So all that content is using the inline policy. So bold, hyperlinks, italic, underline, all those are inline. They render inline. Span, all those render inline.
So they don't mix that.
I'm sorry?
It makes with and block.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So all the elements by default fall into one of these categories. It will either render as block or render as inline. But you can override it using CSS.
What happens if you have a block inside an inline? You override it?
Well, block will take up whatever its parent width tells it to, right? So if the
like
parent
if you
is
put
small,
a UL inside of a bold.
okay, let's see. So for instance, in here,
Yeah, LI.
UL, and then LI. Yeah, it takes up, it becomes a block. Now the parent, this parent usually inline don't have a default size, right? It will take up the size of whatever its children want. If the children want to take up the entire width, the parent says that's fine, go ahead, right? But the parent could decide not to give it its entire. We could decide that the width is smaller, right? Right, and that if you don't fit, and there's an overflow, I want to hide its content. But let's not get into that. That's quite a bit of CSS. Okay, let's keep going here. All right, so when we introduce these, container here, nav bar, no, we say what was it? Fixed top, right? Fixed top. what it did is that okay, so if, it changed the position. It changed the position to be static. Where is it? Where are you? It changed the position. Where are you? Position. It changed it to be fixed, meaning I'm going to fix you. Your position is fixed. You no longer are going to participate, right, in the normal rendering of all the other content, right? You're not so that before you participated, you were blocked. You pushed things that were under you. You just push them down, right? Now because you're fixed, you no longer participate in this. So that means that everybody else doesn't know that you're even there, right? The H1 here and this container below is not being pushed by the nav that was above, right? So we need to compensate for this. We need to compensate because notice that it's being underneath. One way to do it is to go to the body and change the add some additional white space, right? So that it will push everything down to compensate for this header that is not pushing it down. We would explicitly tell the body to add some padding above, right, of maybe 10 pixels. Okay, notice that I'm adding it dynamically, right? It looks like that's pushing it down. Very good. I think let's go with 50 pixels. Okay. Notice that this is not permanent. I am modifying the DOM, right? This is the document object model. This is the interpretation of the browser's interpretation of your HTML file, right? It's object representation. If I copy this, right? If I refresh, notice that everything goes back to the default interpretation of the file. So to fix this, to make it permanent, we need to go to the original HTML and make it permanent. One way we could do is by applying it to a style attribute. Style attributes allow us to modify and apply styling attributes to that particular element, right? So for instance, if I refresh, notice that indeed the body is adding that padding at the top. Yes? Right? Now, adding style attributes to an element directly is very, very frowned upon, okay, amongst front-end developers. It makes it extremely hard to maintain pages if every page has its own style attributes at their own local level, right? If you want to do, website, you want to change the style across an entire website, you don't want to have to go into every single page and have to manipulate every single. Something a little better than this, it could be done applying it to the style attribute, right? And you can put the style here by providing a CSS rule saying that for the body element, I am referring to an element on the page whose name is body, and I'm providing all the styling changes that I want to apply to that one element. Right? This is somewhat like XSLT. That's how XSLT works, right? You have a matching, right, and then you have a rule that whenever this matches in XPath, if it matches a particular XPath expression, right, then you have the transformation that is applied to that particular XPath location, right? Well, that's how XSLT works, right? You have a match, and then what to do when that match matches, right? So CSS is a very watered down version of XSLT, right? You have a rule that says pattern match the left-hand side, and then apply these transformations, right? I want you to transform the attribute of this element, padding top, to be 50 pixels. We refresh, notice that it still works, right? And I can make changes here, maybe to 70. And it still works, right? Even this is frowned upon, right? Of using style elements on a page, still, because you are you're modifying things within the context of a page. You would like to be able to change styles across entire websites, right, instead of individual pages. So instead, what we typically do is that we have a dedicated CSS file, typically referred to as just style CSS, right? And in there, copy all these rules here in a dedicated styles file, okay? In a separate styles sheet, and then from within the document, load those style sheets by referring to them by its location. There it is, style CSS. Okay, again, telling it that this is a style sheet. Okay, so this is the approach that we typically do in our source code, right? You'll find things like this where we have dedicated style sheets outside, and then we refer to them from within the HTML. Right? You should never see in any of our HTML documents any style attributes or style tags. Right? And if you do, let us know, and then we should fix that. All right, and this still works, right? This still works. Any modifications we do here, right, will reflect on the content. Everybody good? All right, awesome. All right, so let's keep playing around. One of the things that we'd like to be able to do, right, is break up the content of each one of these inlines, right? Notice that in Google Docs, what we have is that it's broken up into 1, 2, 3, 4 parts, right? This first part looks like it's halfway. It's like takes up 50% of one of the lines, and the next this takes up maybe 20%, 20%, and 1% perhaps, thereabouts. So we'd like to be able to do something like that, right? We would be the immediate thing that pops up in our minds that we'd like to be able to do. Ooh, maybe we could use a table to do this. Resist the temptation to use tables. Do not use tables. Right? None of our code uses tables. It's considered to be a bad practice. Instead, we use grid systems, right? And most major CSS libraries declare use a grid system. The grid system in Bootstrap is fully documented here in the CSS tab, here in the grid system. And what it does is that it basically allows you to borrow the same ideas of using a table, but without actually using a table, right? Tables, basically the logic is that you have rows, right? And then in each row you have columns, right? And now in tables, you can then use things such as certain columns can span several columns, right? So all these libraries borrow those same ideas, right? And they declare classes. They declare classes that allow you to implement the semantics of rows, right? And then columns declare inside, right? As if these were actual tables, right? This is a table that declares a row and then several columns. Then here's another row and then several columns, rows and columns. Make sense?
So you don't use the concept of
You don't use well, you use it if your tables are still in vogue, right? But you should use them for what they were originally intended for displaying tabular data. And tabular data is not layout. You're not using it for laying out pages. You use it for in tables. You have each row is meant to display maybe a record, and you have many records. Each record has different fields, and each field has the same data type, right? So you have numbers and currency and emails and first names and whatnot, right? So that's a legitimate use of tables, yes. And by all means, keep using tables for those, but not for layout. For layout, instead, we use these grid systems, okay? And let me just show you the documentation gives several examples. So the main idea is that it's going to break up the page. Going to break up the page into 12 equal parts, right? And then you can decide that a particular row takes up, maybe 6 columns, spans across 6 of those 12 columns, and then the next 6 is broken up into smaller pieces, right? Maybe 12, 12, 12. I mean, 2, 2, 3, 3, or something like that, right? Why 12? 12 happens to be a nice number that can be easily divided into various parts, equal parts, maybe divided by obviously 1, 2, 3, divided by 4, divided by 6, equally whole numbers with those. So it's nicely split up into different parts. And this is also an idea that was borrowed from printed media. So this is a very mature idea that has been around since the 1400s when we invented the printing press, and people started thinking of how to lay out newspapers and magazines, and 12 is a nice number that these folks use. Right? If you look at papers today, they're broken up into 12 equal articles. Right? So let's play around with that idea. What we like to be able to do here is break up these into rows, equal rows, right? And each row having maybe a column that spans maybe 6 units, and then maybe one that spans 3 and 3, right? Or maybe 3, 1, 1, right? Or 3, 2, 1, something like that, right? So let's do that. Let's break it up into using this grid system. So we're going to copy this class row, and let's go back to our LI. Let me remove this. And we're going to declare a row. There it is. So that's a row. And in here, we're going to declare a couple columns. Right? We're going to declare a column on the left-hand side, right, and a column on the right-hand side. Right? And to do that, we can use the class and say column. Right? And notice that there's a whole bunch of versions of these columns. Right? And they have the pattern of they all start with column, right? And they all end with a number. Okay? So column, okay, we know what that means, right? It means that this is going to allow you to render things side by side, right, into many columns. The number, also, we sort of know what we mean, right? That we're going to break it up into small columns, bigger columns, and so on and so forth. Yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so forth. But then there's this thing in the middle that says LG, XS, LG, and all this. What is that? So what that is that it allows you, what you tell them here is that, what I told you earlier, right? All these styling mechanisms target certain screen sizes, semantically or logically, right? There's large screens, medium screens, small screens, and really, really tiny screens, right? So what these acronyms here, LG, XS, and so on and so forth, mean is that I'm going to apply this column behavior only for LG size screens. Otherwise, I will behave like I normally behave, like divs. Divs are block items, block elements, right? They want to take up the entire width of the page, right? So what you want to do is that if you want to break them to many columns, it might make sense to have lots and lots of columns in big screens, but it might not make sense to have columns in tiny screens, right? So you want to be able to adapt and say, okay, I want columns for larger screens, but I don't want columns for smaller screens. Make sense? Right? So what this says is that I want columns for large screens, right? That spans 6 columns, right? And then my second column, I want it to be 50-50, right? They notice that they all add up to 12. So on the left-hand side, I want some bogus data, some bogus value, and on the right-hand side, I might want something else. Maybe let's use the same content. Oops.
So the total doesn't become 12?
Typically, yes, you would add up to 12.
No, if I don't do it.
If still things will start wrapping because they don't fit, right? So they'll start wrapping.
If it's more than 12.
If it's more than 12,
no,
if it's more than 12, it's okay. It'll leave the right hand side empty.
Oh, really?
Well, if you have something below that fits, it
Yeah.
will wrap.
Oh, I
So,
see.
so typically you want to make sure that everything adds up to 12. Yes, right. Right. Unless you want it to wrap. Maybe you do want it to wrap. Like for instance, if you have maybe in like in Amazon, sometimes you have this grid system, right, where you have lots of products, and as you start making it smaller, things just wrap because they don't fit. You want them to behave as if they were in line, right? And that's okay, right? So you would make them all the same, right? And when they don't fit, they just wrap, right? Everything just pushes down, right? Maybe that's okay. Maybe that's what you want. But make sure that what you want, right, it's behaving explicitly the way you want it to behave, right? So if we go here and notice now that the content is like 50-50, see that, right? But I am targeting only large screens. That means something that is bigger than like 1200 and above, things like that. If I start making it smaller and I am no longer in large screens, when I go down below 1200, maybe like 1170, right? Notice that it no longer does that, right? I no longer have the columns, right? Because I am saying these columns make sense on large screens, right? Otherwise, behave like normally divs behave. Divs behave when there's not they take up the entire width of the page and they push everything else down below, right? But you might say, oh no, actually, it makes sense here to still have columns here, right? I think it's big enough, right? It's big enough to hold columns. So you might say that I want to target medium screens as well. I still want columns, right? And the way to notice that, there we go. So we have medium-sized screens. But notice that if I make it bigger, I still have the columns, right? So the way these classes are interpreted is that it's medium-sized screens and above. Right? So I'm targeting. So what's good for medium screens is also good for large screens. That's the interpretation of these classes, the behavior of these classes.
So
Right.
the definition of what is large and what is big.
Yeah, so all these are thresholds. All these are very well-defined thresholds that are defined way at the top here. These are the thresholds. So based on popular screen sizes, monitor screen sizes, right? So a common screen size is 1200 pixels, right? That's a common monitor size.
So why don't we make it a call access every time?
I'm sorry?
Call access, then access.
XSY?
Yeah, why don't we make it as access?
Yeah, exactly. If you say excess, that means that you always want the
Yeah.
columns, right? You
Yeah,
always want the columns, right? And it might make sense to have columns in a phone, or maybe not. 12 columns on really tiny screens. Everything would wrap, and you wouldn't be able to see anything like that, right? So more commonly, what you do is that for small screens, you do want it to stack, right? The content to stack, right? But you do want the columns horizontally on bigger screens. But on a smaller screen, you want it to stack one on top of another. Make sense?
Makes sense, yeah.
But if you explicitly, you really, really want the columns, by all means, there is a class for that, right? Where it says,
Maybe
I want.
each column has only one character, then
Maybe it's okay,
Yeah.
or as we'll see in a minute, it might make sense that you have maybe a piece of text, right, and then on the right-hand column you just have a link, right, a very small icon, right. That's enough, right. So that might make sense, right, to split it up like that. So let's play around with that idea. Ever still with me? All right, great. For instance, let's put a link on this right-hand side. Let's put a link here. To do that, Bootstrap has tons of these components and icons that you can use. So let's use. Let's see. Where are you? Cog. There it is. Cog. Let's use this icon. And the documentation says that to use these icons, you just apply them to an empty span element, like this. For instance, gives you this an idea, right? So for instance, we could create here a span and add the class glyphicon cog, right? And then we can refresh that page, and there we have our cog, right? Shown on the right hand side, right? Right, it still behaves, right? It's still there. Notice that when it goes below a certain size into small screens, so notice that it's there for large screens, for medium screens, lower than 1200, and then when you go below 960, 960 is also a very common size of screens, considered to be small, medium-sized screens, or small-sized screens. Notice that it wraps. But you might decide that you still want that. You might still want those columns. You might still want those columns for medium-sized screens. So you could say for small-sized screens. So you could say SM and SM. There it is, right? So you can even have that for a small-sized screen, but not for extra small screens. Or unless you want for extra small screens, so extra small, extra small. There it is. You want to split no matter what, right? All right. So let's use these ideas to break this up into several of these. We want the name of the name of a website. This is a cog. Maybe we want an additional here, who the owner is, or the last modified. Maybe your last modified was yesterday, right? Maybe we'll split this up into 3 and 3, right? Always adding up to 12. There is, we have, I'm sorry? Right, so if it's more than 12, things will start wrapping, right? Because the size doesn't fit, right? If you already took up that amount of space, it doesn't fit, it just wraps, right? Or if you don't add up to 12, if it says you leave a space open for other things that might want to wrap in there, right? Because if it's not space for somebody below you, it will wrap into that space, okay?
Not if it's a block item, right?
Not if it's block, right? Block always takes up the entire width, right? All right. So what else? Let's do a couple more. Maybe I want to put here who the owner is. The owner is me. Notice that this already adds up to more than 12, right? So if I try to render this, notice that the last part doesn't fit and it wraps, right? To add this, maybe we have this is size 1 and this is size 2, right? Okay, there we go. So it looks okay, right? And it's always there regardless. Well, notice for even tiny, tiny, tiny screens, right? And maybe we want that, right? But perhaps things would start wrapping if because they don't fit, right? The size of the screen just doesn't allow you to do these kinds of things, right? What else we could do here? Notice that this is let's add an additional li. That gives some meta information, like if this were a table, or like a heading. This would be maybe name. This is last opened. The owner, right? And the last one I'm just going to leave. Or maybe even let's add maybe a plus that would allow us to add a new website, something like that. There we go, right? What else? These would look better if they were all nicely tucked on the right-hand side. So we could add some of the additional classes that are available, like that would pull content to the right, or justify them to the right, or justify them to the left. So you can justify these to the right-hand side. We can pull right is a very common class that we can have things just pushed. Pull, where's it pull? Pull right. Oh no, wait a minute, not the div. I'm sorry, not the div, the cog. There we go. The cog. There we go. Right, nicely aligned, all on the right-hand side. All right, so let's keep going. So we might actually decide that these two pieces of content actually don't make sense to have them on a phone, right? That instead what we would like to have is just the name of the website, right? And perhaps only the tools, right? So what we could do is just hide them, right? At some point, you hide them at different places for different sizes. To do that, Bootstrap again provides certain classes that allow you to manipulate the behavior, right? To hide certain things. They are documented here in the CSS. There are like helper classes that are documented way at the bottom. Helper classes. They're hidden. There we go. Hidden. These are classes that allow you to, again, center things, move them to the right, move them to the left, or hide certain content depending on the size of the screen, right? So for instance, there's a whole bunch of these hidden XS, hidden SM, hidden MD, LG that allows you to hide content at various targeted screen sizes. See that? So for instance, if you use hidden XS, it will hide that content. It will not show it for small screens, but it will show it for all the other sizes of the screen, right? Maybe you want to hide or show different things at different sizes. So we could grab this class hidden XS and target certain columns. For instance, I might not want these over here, right? This last open and owner at extra small, right? At extra small, right? And so these two also, right? I don't want to show them. I don't want to show them, right? Now, if I refresh and start resizing this, when I hit extra small screens, notice that they're gone, right? They're gone. But notice what happened to the plus and the cog, right? They are still thinking that they should take up one column, right? In a 12-column width. So notice that the left-hand side is of size 6, yes? And this one is of size 1. So it doesn't add up to 12. Right? It doesn't add up to 12. So it's adding up to 7, meaning I still have 5 more columns on the right-hand side that I could fill with stuff, right? So what I would like to happen here is that this plus and this cog should behave differently depending on the size of the screen, right? They should be one size, one column, in bigger screens, but they should behave taking up the slack, right, in larger screens, right? So what we could do is that I want it to behave as a one column. I want it to behave as one column in medium size or small screens and above, right? Meaning small screens, medium screens, and large screens. I want it to be one column, but in extra small size screens, I want it to behave differently, right? I want it to behave taking up the slack, right? The rest of the column, meaning I want it to be column XS 6, right? For that extra small and extra small screens, I want it to be of size 6, take up the entire rest of the page. That makes sense, right? Right. So let's do that. Let's copy this. Let's copy that and apply it to this one over here as well. Let's do that. There it is. Now it's behaving. See that on bigger screens? We have the last open and owner, right? And as I become smaller and smaller and smaller, notice that they disappear, right? Leaving me just with plus and cog, right? Or another way to do this is that notice that if I inspect this, right? The name is still taking up just half of the page, right? And this cog is kind of taking up the other half of the page. But notice that cog, I don't really need that much space for that cog, right? A better solution could be that stay at one size, right? And instead just tell the name to take up the rest of the space, right? So let's try that out. Let's leave this the way it was, right? Let's leave it the way it was. Right? Stay always at one column, and instead let's give more space to the name, right? The name could be bigger, right? It might not fit, right? It might start wrapping in such small screens, right? So what we could do is say that it's going to take up half only at medium-sized screens and above, right? But for really tiny screens, I want to take up all of it, right? Well, 12 minus 1, because the cog is going to take up 1. I'm going to take up 11, right? So let me copy that and paste it here, right? And let me refresh this. And there it is, right? I think it's behaving right. Oops. Uh-oh, what happened here? Did I say medium? I think I meant small, right? Yeah, small. Small and above, right?
Both places.
Oh, both places, thank you. And right here. There we go. All right, so when I reach extra small screens, the middle columns just disappear, right? And I'm just left over with the name. And notice that if I inspect this, indeed I am taking up the large portion of the screen, and I'm just leaving the cog on the right-hand side. Everybody okay? That makes sense? Awesome. All right, so say I navigate to another page. Let's maybe I navigate to this page, right? To this website. Let's create a hyperlink out of this. Let's create a hyperlink.
I have one question here. So if you give two columns,
Yep.
if I give two smalls, would it still act the same? Or
I mean, it will apply those widths, right? Those sizes only for the small screens, right? All the other ones, XS and whatnot, are don't play.
Like in this case, you have a small and an extra small for the first build.
Right.
So would the second column only come in the case when first is false, or it's ideally the same bootstrap class name value that you're given, but the second one gets active only after you read certain.
Right. Yeah. The combination here is that the larger size, right, controls all the upper ones, right? So medium controls medium and above. MD or small or medium is medium and above. SM control SM, medium and large, right? And they go all the way. So if I don't have this, then XS controls all the other ones, right? But since I have this, then SM is controlling all the above ones. Yep. So let's create a hyperlink here. And the hyperlink might be go to website edit.html. Right, so a completely different page. And so this creates a hyperlink. There it is. Looks as a hyperlink, and it navigates somewhere. We're not going anywhere. There's nothing there. Obviously, if this would be an Angular application, this would be going to something like /websites or something, right? Websites, right? And you would be using ngView and all that, right? But we're not doing that just yet. For rapid prototyping, this is a great tool to put something together real quick and to elicit requirements from upper management and say, what do you think? Right? And before we actually build it, it's a great fast prototyping tool. And just bang a couple pages together and put it in front of upper management. This cog also would be nice if this were a hyperlink as well. Probably navigating to exactly the same page. In this case, we would want to apply the pull right. The pull right, we want to apply it to the hyperlink itself, not the cog, right? Because the cog is now inside, right, of the hyperlink. So we apply the pull right to this. There we go. So we have this over here. All right, so let's navigate there. The page doesn't exist. Let's create it. I'm going to start from the same exact page. I'm going to start from the same exact page. So I'm just going to build on that page, and this is website edit. Website edit. In this website edit, if I refresh, it looks exactly the same, but we're going to have a left side and a right-hand side. The left-hand side is going to look like this, right? Oops, that's too small. And that's because I'm at 100, more than 100%. Yeah, I'm zoomed in. So the left-hand side is going to look like this, right? The list of all our websites, and the right-hand side is going to be like an editor, right? So that we can click through each one of the websites, and the right-hand side changes, showing different names of the websites, different URLs, different number of visits, all the metadata about that particular website. Okay. Okay. So this left-hand side, this container fluid, this list of websites on the left-hand side is now going to be the left-hand side of something that's going to have like a 1/3, 2/3 split pane, right? Like a pane on the left-hand side and a pane on the right-hand side. So we're gonna put this inside of a row, right? And this is going to be a class equal row, right? So this whole thing, right, is going to be part of a row. And we're going to put this inside of a column. So this is going to be a left-hand side column, div class column. So 1/3 of 12 is 4. Okay, so XS 4. So this is going to be the left-hand side that ends right here, right there. So all this UL is going to be on the left-hand side. So let's refresh. Oops. I think we need the right-hand side too. Let's put the right-hand side. So on the right-hand side, we're going to have another column. XS, so 2/3 is 8, right? So this is the right-hand side. Am I not editing the right thing? What's going on? Why are you ignoring me? What? I thought I did. Oh. I'm editing website list. I hate computers. They always do exactly what they're told. Wait, let me change this. Copy, paste. I say edit 1.
Yeah, and copy edit into list. Because list is edit.
Okay, so this is list, right?
Yeah. No, so this is list. Now copy edit into list.
So copy.
Yeah, and paste it in list.
Wait a minute, I was editing list, right?
You were editing list. You
Okay,
made a copy. Edit
right, no,
one.
no. But I want to make sure that I made a copy, right? I
Yeah,
have it.
you did.
Okay,
Edit
great.
one is copy of
Excellent.
list.
So I can copy this. Copy into here.
Yeah,
Very good.
and then
And then
copy edit one into
no, I
edit.
don't need this anymore.
Yeah, delete it.
I can remove this. Good.
And then rename that as
Then rename this as edit. There we go. All right. Okay, refresh. There we go. Okay, we have the left-hand side, right? This is 1/3 on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side we have this right-hand side over here. Okay, and on the right-hand side we might have things such as Wait a minute. Let me copy this a couple more times, just so that we have something. Yeah, we have three websites on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, we might have, perhaps all sorts of forms, right? We might have maybe a label that says the name of the website, right? Name of the website, maybe an input field. There we go. Maybe we can style it by applying some of the Bootstrap classes, such as form control, right? So that it converts it into a block element. By default, input fields are inline elements, right? Which they just render from left to right. But form control converts them into block elements. A couple of these, you might have another one. Maybe there's a name, maybe a description, and here you might have a text area. Also form control. Text areas, you need to have the closing text area, right? So if you refresh, there it is, description and whatnot. Okay, and we would like to have so that when this gets too small, notice the left-hand side is way too small. See that? What we might want to do when it's being used, like over here, it makes no sense, right, to include the content of the last opened and the owner, right, and have this always be of size 11. And same thing with this one, right? This is also always 11, right? And in such a small screen with a third split, we don't want that. Okay, so we have something like that. We still have. Do we have another one? Oh, we have this one, right? And we have this. And we have yet another one. Oh my goodness. Okay, so notice that the one column that we're giving to this link is not enough for smaller screens. So maybe we might want to either hide the left-hand side entirely for small screens, or or give this right-hand side just a little more space, right? So maybe convert this into 10 and 12, 10. 12 and 2, sorry. 10 and 2. And 10 and 2. Or we might decide that for such small screen, you know what, we're just going to hide the entire left screen. Right? Just gone. So this looks good for even tinier screens. That's very good. So, but by now we might have decided that, you know what, for on a portrait mode of a phone or in a portrait mode of an iPad, I don't want the left-hand side. Just hide the entire thing. Just remove it. So what we could do is that this column XS4 that represents the left-hand side, right? We could just hide it, right? We could say that for really tiny screens, I'm just going to hide it. I want only for small screens and above, right? And the right-hand side, right, decide that I want 8 for small screens and above, but for tiny screens, I want to take up the entire width of the page, right? For really tiny small screens, I want to take up the entire 12 columns of the page, right? So to refresh here, if I go even further down, right, under 750, I believe. There we go. Notice that we hit the entire left-hand side, and we only left off with the right-hand side. And whenever we have enough space, there we go.
Why
right?
not misalign?
What's misaligned?
The website, see the name and description. I'm not understanding.
Yeah, no, because typically we're not going to use this H1, right?
Yeah.
right? So typically that would be way up here. Notice that-
Now it is aligned.
Yeah.
There is some padding.
Yeah, and the top padding of 50 pixels probably is not enough, right? Maybe this one should be pushed even further in the styles. I think 60 might be a little better. Yeah, there we go, right? Something like that.
In this case, instead of using padding, they use a breakpoint instead of backslash.
Break. So breaks are meant for explicitly breaking things that would otherwise render inline. So for instance, an address, right? So an address, even though you might add white spaces on the HTML, the browser is going to ignore them, right? Because browsers ignore extra white spaces. But typically we consume addresses, street, city, blah, 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 right? And so that's an appropriate use of break, but not to just add extra space, right? So usually if you want to lay out things, typically you should always use CSS to push things. Also because break, different fonts will render differently, right? And so that spacing depends on whether it's 12 point, 14 points, or whatever, right? Whereas pixels is always that amount of pixels.
So all this dynamic rendering, right?
Yeah.
How is Bootstrap doing it? Is it using jQuery?
No. All this is silent. So what it's doing, it's using this technique. Let me show you. Navbar. No, not navbar. Row. This row. I don't know if you can see it here. Wait, just a second. Row, columns. There we go. It's using a technique called media. Media.
Yeah.
This is a very old thing that was not meant for responsive design. It was the original intent was that HTML could be consumed in different ways. Right? It could be consumed on a web page, or it could be consumed if I print it. It would be consumed on a printed page, right? So on a web page, there's no concept of the size of the page, right? It just continuously renders as one single stream. But on a piece of paper, yes, there are a limited size of the paper. Also, websites are meant to be resized, right, and just expand and blah blah blah. Whereas a piece of paper is always the same. So the idea came about that we wanted to be able to target different media, target print media as opposed to screen media, right? And then we would like to be able to have rules. These CSS rules apply differently for print media or for screen media, right? So what they're doing here is that column, right? And you could put rules here that if the width is less than 768, then or is bigger than 768, the width of column SM4 is 33%. Right? If it's
And a browser understands this language.
yeah, these are all right. It parses them and then dependent, and then it triggers these rules based on the size of the screen. Right? There's different ways you can have it in separate files, and says, okay, use this file for this screen size, or you can have it all inside of one single style sheet, and then and create a curly brackets, and then all these rules apply for the screen size, and these other rules apply for a different screen size, right? And the browser applies the rules depending on the screen size, without any. It's almost like a programming language,
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
based on the screen size,
Yeah.
right? And again, obviously, if we didn't have this, we would have to use JavaScript to do this, right? So my point of this whole thing was to, as much as possible, use any logic that the browser interprets natively, right? Like this. Right? This is
So
a very
that Angular, whatever that framework you said, which is similar to Bootstrap.
Angular materials.
Yeah, so they'll also use all
They all use variations of this idea.
So dot call dash sm dash 4.
Well, no, they might have different names for those styles. They use this app media rules. You know? And then they have the styles apply to different sizes of the string.
So then how does the browser know what does dot call sm4 mean?
Oh, no, you give it. You tell it.
Yeah, you tell it, but then so it knows, the browser knows that when the string size becomes small,
Right.
then I got to do this with
Right, exactly. I'm gonna look for all elements that have a class of column small 4, and I'm going to convert their width to be 33%. And that's how that's how we're achieving the 1/3, 2/3. 33% is third. Okay. All right. All right. I think I'm gonna leave it here. So responsive design, we don't fully support this responsive design in our products. If we want to do responsive design, typically you want to start with responsive design from the beginning. It's very, very, very hard to retrofit responsiveness into something that is not responsive. Very, very hard. Ideally, we go from design with responsive from the get-go, but we don't have that.
I remember there was some engineer in California who made it responsive, right? Ours was not. Who was that?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if it's
Somebody worked on making it responsive in PSI 9.
Mhm.
I forget.
Oh, okay. Maybe TE or
TE,
TE. Okay.
I forget his name.
No, it's not Rod, is it?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
He's the only one I know of that Rod. Oh, yeah. I know this. I think I met him when in the
Yeah, PSI.
PSI.
Yeah.
Tall glasses, curly hair.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think he's no longer with us.
Yeah, he's no longer.
Yeah.
He used to work for Atomic, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.